mind is full of today. All right, welcome to Mindful Live number 65. I'm Nathan Springer, your host. Nice to have you here. It is currently the 8th of April 2022. The days are flying past. Yes, and it's Mindful Live 65. We're going well along here. Quite a few have gone on already. As I usually say, if you missed any before and you're very interested to see what did we speak about previously, well, you can go over to my YouTube channel, Nathan Spring on YouTube, and subscribe over there and find out what we spoke about previously. All right, so what we're talking about today, at least what we're starting the conversation about. Usually I start speaking about what I did the contemplation on, and what I did the contemplation on was a story I saw today. The contemplation basically covered most of the story. Good night, Kimmy Poo. The contemplation covered most of the story, and it was about the DPP complaining about the bail amendment bill. Well, complaining about the ruling on the bail amendment bill, where our appeal court struck down that bill. That's one. Then the next thing we're talking about tonight has to do with the SEA Bacchanal. I don't know how many of you are following this, but there has been some bacchanal brewing in the SEA, the secondary entrance assessment, from since way back in 2020. And we're going to cover that too. And from that, we'd cover some of the changes going on in the Ministry of Education, and well, some of the lack of changes, some of the things that we would have liked to see, probably some kind of attempt to change and improve going on, but unfortunately, that's not the angle that many people are planning to go in. And yes, obviously, we would speak about the gas hike. There has been a hike in not just gas, in fact, most of the consumer petrol that you get at the gas station here. They've seen a price increase. We're covering that. And if we do have time, other interesting stories. I saw a judge in the family court speaking about some of the rules concerning divorce that they would like to see changed. That's some interesting stuff. And even further than that, it's all according to how much time we have. We could even go over to Guyana and see some things that are going on in Guyana, where we are seeing Guyana attempt to navigate the territory of becoming an oil wealthy nation without the drawbacks that Trinidad has seen. So we'd see how they are doing on that journey. Yeah. So let's get started at least with the first story of the day. I don't have that story pulled up. I spoke about it in the contemplation, and I just speak about it generally for the quick bit. For those of us who might have forgotten or don't know, our appeal court struck down a provision in our bail bill, in the Bail Act. Part of this said that anyone charged with murder, accused of murder, and currently on trial for murder cannot access bail. That was part of the rules. You could not access bail if you were a murder accused person. Now, what the appeal court said, can you explain how we're getting more money for gas yet still have to pay more at the pumps? We get to that, Bobby De Unarine. I will speak about that. I will try and explain that as much as I can. But the bail bill, what our appeal court basically said was that they basically had two main arguments against this bail bill. First off, had to do with the general freedom and rights of an individual. In our system, you are innocent until proven guilty. What bail attempts to do is it attempts to allow people that privilege during the time it takes for the court case to be heard. You see, from the time you are charged till you are convicted in court, you are still supposed to be considered innocent. However, the dilemma that some people found themselves in is if someone now is charged with murder and we think this person is a murderer, and in our court system it could take several years for the case to be completed, do we want a murderer free during that meantime if we already catch them? So the law passed saying that no person accused of murder should be able to access bail, ever. Now, what the appeal court actually said was, that's not according to our constitution. That doesn't line up with people's individual freedoms and rights. Someone is considered innocent until proven guilty. And just because you have accused them of murder doesn't negate that right. And I understood that point from the appeal court. The other point was, blessed night Flo Christopher. The other point was that, in fact, that granting of bail or rejecting of bail was not the business of the parliament. The parliament can't just make a law telling people, well, you can't get bail and you can't get bail. That's not within our constitution. The proper process for someone to be refused the right to get bail is to go through the court system. That's according to our constitution. And that's what the appeal court said. They said that if you don't want someone to get bail, that's up to the court, not up to the legislature and the parliament. So they reversed that. Now murder accused people have the right to request bail. Now, here's the thing. The appeal court also mentioned that in most cases, either way, murder accused people never got bail. So you'd be going to court and very likely they won't get bail anyway. However, here's the problem that the DPP is saying. As what happened as soon as this happened, it opened the floodgates. I believe there was how much? 700 and something, or was it 1,000? I can't remember the exact figure. Some amount of people that could have now gone out there and requested bail asked for this in court. The problem is each person that now requests bail, the DPP's office would have to prosecute that case. They would have to be on the opposing side of that. So now that's stretching the DPP's office. Blessed Night, interesting. That's stretching the DPP's office. And Flame On also. The DPP's office that he already said was understaffed. He said they've been having staffing problems for quite some time now. So this is stretching their already understaffed office. That's one. Then on the police side, the police have to then go and check their records, etc., etc., etc. There's a special department in the police to do all of this, and that department is now being overworked and overstretched because this is now a flood of cases. 78 cases are now being heard for this. Now, I find 78 to not actually be that much of a flood, but I guess that is dependent on how many people you have on staff. And if you are already understaffed before, one more person is already too much, much less for 78, I would guess. So I understand the argument. And then even on the prison side, now someone in the comments in the contemplation was saying that it is not true that the records are manual. Now I am saying the records are manual based on news that I saw coming from the deputy commissioner of the prison. So I'll take his word over a random commenter on TikTok. The deputy commissioner of police, their records are manual. It is not digital. Someone has to manually go through the system to get all those records. So all of that is holding up the system. It's delaying the system. And the DPP is saying these are all reasons why the murder accused should have never been allowed to access bail. And I understand what he's saying. It's stressing the system, but I disagree. I don't think this is an argument against someone's rights. I don't think an institution not being properly prepared or properly staffed is proper reason to deny someone of their rights. The argument you'd have to make against the justice's ruling, I guess, would have to be that you believe a murder accused person does not have the right of being seen as innocent until proven guilty. You're free to make that argument, but saying that the institutions are being overworked and overstretched does not make that argument. That does not prove in any way that the murder accused should not be given that right. Good night to Joel Chow. Good night, Quinn Trim over on YouTube, and Anthony Vidal Skit. So what's the good man? Good night, good night, good night, everyone. Make sure to hit that like button as per usual. Once you're viewing the live, hit the like button wherever you're viewing the live. Drop a comment if you have something to say. And we go on. So yes, I find it kind of strange. I don't understand that as a reasoning. I don't understand how that is a plausible reason. That, listen, hey, good night, Central Chow Master, what's the good man? That, hey, our institutions are not properly staffed. We do not have the proper infrastructure in our institutions. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take away your rights. My view on that is that sounds like the logic of the old woman who lived in the shoe. If you're over on YouTube and you see the name of this live, you may be wondering where that came from. Well, that's where that came from. I find that logic is the old lady in the shoe kind of logic. I don't know how many of you remember that old nursery rhyme. Now, personally, I find a lot of those nursery rhymes we got from those British were just downright cruel. I don't know exactly what they were trying to teach the young people back then, but that was some strange stuff. A lot of those nursery rhymes, when you really take a pause and like, wait, what are you really saying here, boy? You're like, yeah, this don't make sense. But yes, the old lady who lived in the shoe. The old lady who lived in the shoe had so many children, she didn't know what to do. So she gave them all supper without any bread or something to that effect, and then whipped them all soundly and sent them to bed. What the whole point of that was, I guess you'd have to go back in time and ask those old British colonists. But I find this kind of logic that the DPP is using now is the same kind of logic like that. So we have so many murder accused, we don't know what to do. So here's what we'll do: we'll whip all of you soundly. We'll take away the right this is what the appeal court said. We deem that you have this right, but what we're going to do is, well, we just have too many people to handle, so licks for everyone. Maybe if murder accused are considered as risk to public safety, then DPP can make that argument. Exactly, that is an argument that can be made. But here's the thing with that argument is to be made when the person requests bail. So this person goes up there and requests bail, and then the representative from the office of the DPP goes to the court representative. Who do you think? Whoa, let's not go there. And the representative of the DPP goes to court, makes the argument to try and prove that this person that was accused of murder is too dangerous to allow in public, even though we haven't proven them guilty yet. The evidence we have so far already proves this much, that this person shouldn't be allowed out. And that's the argument the DPP makes to the court. And then the court master, the judge, whoever, rules that no bail for this murder accused. It happens very common. It is the most common thing when it comes to murder accused. What you cannot do, however, is request that the parliament makes a law that prohibits all murder accused from even requesting bail. Like, when you think about that, that really does not line up with proper free democratic style of a judiciary. When you think about it, I am just accused of a murder here. There's no proof. If this becomes something where I cannot access bail, then that means an accusation of murder is already a sentence to prison. And we know that there are innocent people accused. How is bail set? That is set by the master depending on different circumstances. Now, here's the thing. There are 78 people currently requesting bail. 78 murder accused currently requesting bail. However, only one has been granted bail so far. And even the one that has been granted bail, it was $750,000 or something to that effect. And he hasn't been able to access it. And either way, the DPP office is appealing his access to his granting of bail. So it's not even like this is just all of a sudden going to just flood people out into the open. So I don't understand that argument. Like, no, that's the wrong word. I do understand the argument. I don't agree with the argument. I don't think that the institutions being incapable of handling the workload is good enough reason to cancel someone's rights. I just don't think that's the way rights are meant to function, you know? We can't do it, folks, so no rights anymore. Sorry, the institutions aren't properly staffed. Goodbye to your rights. I just don't think that is the way it is meant to function. But speaking about institutional dysfunction, let's get into the Ministry of Education. Yes, speaking of institutional dysfunction, let's get over to the Ministry of Education. This is a story that I've been... That's the in-case licks from long time. Yes, Anthony Vidal, that's exactly what that is, in-case licks. But let's get into the Ministry of Education. I've been seeing a bit of murmurs of this story floating for the last few days, floating across the last few days. And I said, finally, as the story seemed to be coming to a close in terms of the amount of information coming out of it, I said, now might be the time where we address some of this. SEA fiasco. Top SEA pupil invited and then uninvited to receive President's Medal. But here's the thing. They were invited, uninvited, and then re-invited to some extent. The family of a former Maria Regina grade school pupil is now exploring their legal options after their son, whom the Ministry of Education acknowledged scored the highest in the country in the secondary entrance assessment exam, was invited and then uninvited to receive the President's Gold for his achievement. The boy was not among the top 10 performers when results were released on October 8th, 2020. I really don't want to call the young lady's name. A girl of San Fernando TML Primary School was announced as the top SEA performer that year. However, the boy's family requested a review of his scores by the Caribbean Examination Council following the results, given that he had been a consistent high performer at the school. CXC is responsible for constructing SEA papers and scoring them. The reviewed results showed that the boy scored full marks in the English language art writing component of the exam. His original results had showed a lower score. In a letter dated March 31st, 2022, Acting Chief Education Officer of the Ministry of Education, Lisa Henry David, wrote to the principal of Maria Regina Grade School informing her that the boy was to be awarded the President's Medal Gold for placing first in the exam. The ceremony, the letter said, would be held at a specific date. You and the pupil name, as well as 3 other guests, have been invited to attend, it stated. The school principal was also asked to indicate the names of the guests. The boy's family was also informed. On that same day, the ministry wrote to the principal of the girl's former school, inviting the girl to receive the President's Silver Medal for placing second in the SEA exam and not the gold. So, some Steve Harvey business went on there. I don't know how many of you remember that Steve Harvey mistake in the what that was, the Miss World or Miss Universe, whichever one. They all kind of losing their pips now. Ministry of Education is the worst, can't even get onto them. They don't answer the phone and emails take too long. No comment on Ministry of Education. Of course, no comment, Nubian Empress. Of course, no comment. I won't expect a comment. Not from you. But yes, some Steve Harvey business went on there. So, one girl was told she placed first initially. Then, when that letter was written, sometime in March, a letter was written to the young man telling him that actually you placed first. So you are going to come to this event, to this award ceremony, and you are going to get the gold medal. And then they told the girl, who actually they told before had placed first, they told her that actually, young girl, you are going to get the silver medal. But the young girl wasn't taking that. At least the young girl's family wasn't taking that. And they hired lawyers. Now, for those of you who pay attention to the names of the lawyers that try different cases, to keep a little finger on the pulse of certain political activity, the names of some of the lawyers selected by the girl's family might be a little familiar to some of us. They include, I believe, one former Attorney General, Mr. Ananram Logan, etc., 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 etc. But that's nearly irrelevant in this. The girl's family hired lawyers because they don't like that Steve Harvey business. And then when they hired lawyers and said what they said to the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Education reversed that and said, actually, young fella, though you came first, you're still going to have to take the silver. I don't know if he's even going to get the silver. You're still going to have to get what you're going to get. The girl is still going to get the gold. That's the point the ministry came back to. Now, I believe I read recently that the boy's family has gotten some lawyers, and that's going to make this whole thing a lot more interesting even now. But I listened to an interview from the Minister of Education. Now, this article explains it. You could read that. But I listened to the interview, and the Minister of Education, I think, gave a pretty good explanation as to why this was that way. And tell me if this explanation makes sense to you. What the Minister of Education said was there's a preliminary list, and they make their placings, their medals, based on that preliminary list. The preliminary list, the early list, had the young lady as placing the highest. She placed first, and they already made the announcement based on that preliminary list. It goes around through the news. She gets a gift. She got her award from this person. B-Mobile gave her some kind of contract business. Things are nice, right? That's the preliminary list. But however, after everyone gets their preliminary results, my question is, does it even matter? We'd get to this. Don't worry, we'd get to this. After the preliminary list, now you can query your results. As per usual, you can query your results. Now, what the minister was pointing out was that usually people who get their first choice don't query their results. The people who get their first choice aren't interested in querying their results, because really and truly the SEA exam is a placement exam. The point of this exam is to see where you are going to go. And if you already placed into your first choice, usually you aren't caring to question anything more than that. Why would you query anything if you already get the maximum reward for this exam? The maximum reward for the exam being your first choice. The minister made that point. But here's what happened. The young man got his results, and I believe he already went to his first choice, but they saw a result that they found strange. Knowing that the young man performed highly in school, they saw a result that was uncharacteristically low. Now, here's the thing. I think if I go back in time and something similar like this happened, I could see my parents wanting to query those results too. Because there are some parents who are very interested in your grades beside your placement. So if a parent knows a child is producing a certain kind of result continuously, you're continuously placing 95 plus in your English language arts exams, and then the exam comes and I see 60 in the exam, I would be curious. I might want to query it also. The query might not have been anything to do with getting the boy the president goal. The young man, I don't even think when they queried it, the expectation was for him to reach first, because he was below even the top 10. Their query was simply because they saw him with a lower grade than they expected. So they queried to find out about that, and I see nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that's good parenting. If you give me the results, in a percentage, I am going to pay attention to the percentage. And as this was the rule, I believe, from my parents, and I believe many good parents give their children this rule. The only person you really compete with is yourself. So if I'm to compete with myself, my grade, my number grade does matter. So if I was always getting 98% in my writing, and now the exam tells me 60, I want to query it and find out if that is correct. Understood. Now here's something that's very interesting. The Minister of Education says that the query happened in 2020. The Minister of Education said that since 2020, they already knew that the young man, the boy, actually placed first. They knew that since 2020. However, she said that this kind of thing was unprecedented, because usually the people within the top 10 don't query. So whoever is placed first in the preliminary rankings usually they just keep that position. But since the query happened in that high ranking, they figured it out. Live sticking bad. I am sorry, I don't know what is causing that. Maybe the internet is giving some problems. My apologies. I don't know what's going on in that side. Right. So here, let me finish there. And the Ministry of Education found that out since 2020. Ah, good. Well, they say it's good. So, Flame On, I think you should probably check your internet connection. They knew this since 2020, but what the minister said is they made a decision. They made a decision that they were going to stick with the preliminary results because that is what the common practice was. The medals were always awarded based on the preliminary results. So they decided to stick with those results. Now, what the minister was saying, part of the reasoning for that is because the preliminary results already were 2+ months away. A lot of the announcements were already made. Someone already made, as it were, the wrongs the parade as the top student. It is kind of brutal to then try to change that back. That's the point the minister was making. So she said since 2020, they already knew that the boy was the first one, and they already made the decision that they were still going to give it to the girl. Now, come 2022, when the award ceremony was going to happen, they said, and they're blaming it now on a senior official, a senior education ministry official, they said went against that procedure and wrote the letter to the boy and to the girl informing them that the boy would get the girl and the gold and the girl would get the silver. Now, they are angry with the senior education official because that's against policy. The policy was the girl was still supposed to get it. Now, there are several questions I have in this. Now, I presume the senior education ministry official did not like what the Ministry of Education was doing, and they thought that they would take it into their own hands to inform the boy that he was actually first. Because here's something I wonder about here. When the boy's parents, not the boy himself, very likely his parents, did the query, and they found out that the boy did better than he initially did they actually find out that he was now the first place student? I am curious to find that out, because they would have found out that he got an increase in his English language grades. I don't think they would have necessarily found out that he came out first. I don't think they would have found out that change in ranking. I don't think that news would have been known to the parents. So, the education ministry would have known the boy came first, but very likely they would have intended to keep that information away from him. I'm not sure they would have known. Interesting says he thinks they would have. I am not sure. If you query the results, if you query your results, what you're going to get the new information on is your new grades. It's not going to tell you your new national ranking. That's not what happens. The query isn't based on that because the query is with CXC. No, I did not speak on that, and I don't think I am going to speak on that, Josiah. Sorry, I don't think that needs my conversation right now. I think that's a very personal issue that I was not there for. So, yeah. But, yeah, no problem with asking. I'm speaking right now on the SEA incident. However, I am not sure this young man would have even known that he came first. However, I think the senior education official wanted to let this boy know that he came first. I think that word you used there, that leak word, I think the senior education official had intention of leaking it. Now, I have several reasons to think so. Let me get a little dry here. I have several reasons to think so. Here's part of this. If you've been reading some of the friction you're seeing online based on this story, you would be seeing some gendered slants. You would be seeing some race slants. Because from the news given so far, it seems like the young lady was a young lady of East Indian descent. The young man is a young boy of Afro descent. It would seem. That's the news that is being pushed right now. And from the time it has that kind of juxtaposition, you know Trinidadians going to be wilding already. And I will not be surprised if in that case, someone within the ministry sees that, and I have seen people saying things like this. I'm not just saying this out of tin cloth. I would think that some people in the ministry would be saying like, yeah, this little young black boy deserves to know that he actually did well. I can understand that argument, and I can see some people believing that and making decisions based on that kind of argument. I don't know if anyone in the chat can see it. I don't know how many of you might be willing to say something like that, but that's something I could see happening. I can see that happening. Now, the Minister of Education said that she was disappointed in this education official because she did not want this to happen. The young lady was the one who was supposed to get it based on preliminary results, because that is the way it has always happened. It has always been based on preliminary results. Now, I disagree with that. Part of the reason that the Minister of Education was saying is that the whole intention of this exam is really to place students. So if you placed in your first choice, that's basically the reward already there, and you aren't supposed to necessarily be looking for any more rewards than that. I can understand what she's saying there, but here's the problem. It's y'all who created this problem. If you decide to give out the president's goal, for the person who placed the first in SEA exams, listen, if my child, I have found out, placed first, I would be interested in them getting the gold. And you telling me something about the preliminary, and the preliminary isn't going to change that fact. If you are awarding the person who placed the highest, then it's regardless of what happens anytime after. Look at the Olympics. If you are caught doping 10 years down the road, they are going to strip you of that gold medal. The person who got silver is then going to get gold, and the medals are going to change going down the road. To me, that makes more sense than you telling me that, you know what needs to happen? Well, the person who already got it, because that's just how the system is I disagree. I fully disagree with that. Now, the Minister of Education was pointing out that it could create much more, an increase in complexity in more than just that one instance, because what could happen is everyone then could go and query their results, and then you'd have a reshuffling of the entire top 10 thing. Now, here's the thing. That's a problem that you all created. If you created a value based on this top 10 business, don't be surprised if people are willing to query their results to find out if they are placed in that top 10. If you are telling me that the real reason for this exam is just to place people in schools, then that should have been the whole thing of it from the beginning. You place people in schools, there's no mark given, all you get is a placement, and that's the end of that. But if you are rewarding me based upon my rank, don't make it seem like I am selfish for looking forward for my reward based on my rank. That's you. You created this system that rewards me based on my rank, and then you are looking at me like I'm weird for wanting the reward that you created based on my rank. I don't agree with that. I don't agree, because in the interview with the Minister of Education, someone asked her if they are going to give the boy an award, and she said, which award? An award for what? And I was taken aback. I found that to sound insulting and offensive. I understand your point on the girl's side, where it's very disappointing to give her that Steve Harvey treatment where you parade her wrong and then strip her of it. I understand that, but I think fact is fact, and you need to treat it like that. Now, the Minister of Education went on to say, in the end of all of this, the ending result of all of this may have led to the stripping away of the entire ranking system. This is the minister saying it is my personal view that it has outlived its usefulness and is now an additional stressor in an already high stress environment. My deepest apologies go out to both students who performed excellently and should not have been subjected to this experience. I agree. They should stop ranking children. School placements based on grades, already bad as it is. The quality of education should be the same in every school. I agree. The quality of education should be the same in every school. Now, quality is a hard thing to measure. I think the quality of education should be the same in all schools, but I don't think the style of education should be the same in all schools. It is a fact not everyone learns the same. It is a fact some people are faster at problem solving than others. IQ, the intelligence quotient, now there are several mitigating factors. Several people try to throw some spokes in the wheel, but the reality is it does exist. There is something called intelligence, and it does make sense that you stratify people in learning to some extent. That does make sense. However, when you make a difference between this school and this school based not only on just different people learn differently, but this school is better than this school, that creates a problem, because then people would want to go to this one more than this one. That creates a problem. And I'm not sure if that problem can totally be eradicated, but I can tell you this kind of ranking system they have right now, I don't think it's conducive. Now, I've always had several questions about this ranking system. If you have 10,000 students writing the same exam, are you really going to tell me that you could find a substantive difference to rank the top 10 students higher and lower than each other? I think actually the top 10 students in that exam may have all drawn for 99.9 or something like that. How do you actually stratify the top 10 students? And why isn't it just all a bunch of 20 students draw for first place, another 40 drew for second place, another 50 drew for third place? I find the fact that they could stratify that differently among each student, I find that hard to believe. That's me. I always found it hard to believe. It's just very strange. I don't know how they do that. I just find it hard to believe. What are your opinions on SEA on the whole? Do you think it is wise or not? I personally think one single exam is a terrible way of judging a child's capability for placement. I agree. This kind of petty thing, Trinidad and Tobago talking race thing here, when they supposedly have to get together. Some kids don't even work well in exams. I agree. Now, I don't know. I'm not fully sure if I'm with throwing away all exams, because exams have a purpose. The point of exams is checking how much you know. And it's important to know how much people know. Sup over on Instagram, Casper Kings. That's important. However, telling a child to learn something for 7 years and give them one exam based on the entire 7 years, expecting them to be tested on that one exam, is a bit much. So I agree that the SEA in its current format is not a good thing. I think there should be more of a continual assessment, streamlining people into ideal schools as they go along. I think that's a much more logical system, a much more streamlined. It's not one exam, it's a continual assessment based on multiple exams. Now, one of the problems people find with continual assessments is that continual assessment kind of gives a lot of authority and a lot of responsibility to the teacher. And I remember in primary school, I had some sexist teachers. I remember having some sexist teachers. They used to fight the boys. I am telling you, as a little youth, 8-year-old single digits back then, coming first in the test, and this teacher, after a while, you came up in this specific standard, and this teacher fighting us. I remember that. And if I had to take continual assessment from some teachers like that, we're in trouble. And that's the problem with the continual assessment. That's the thing. There isn't really a one-size-fits-all, a cure for everything. It's a difficult problem. It's a difficult problem. Well, that exam, see how good they are with their hands. It's a difficult problem to solve. And here's another thing that I think some people... The older system of placing students after secondary school, I actually think was better than the new system, where they attempt to place everyone and they're attempting to force a fake leveling of the playing field. All the schools get named East and West, like everyone is going to forget which one was a junior sec and which one was a senior sec. That's ridiculous. That does not happen. Couva West and Couva East still have a separation in prestige. The renaming did nothing to that. It didn't change that fact. So that doesn't change that. I don't like that idea. The older system where if someone struggled, then you keep them to repeat that year. If they struggled again, then you put them in a technical vocational program. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem with that was the stigma that the society placed on those things. The thing itself, placing someone who was struggling in the general academic stream into a technical vocational stream, nothing was wrong with that. Placing someone who was struggling in the general academic stream into a junior secondary, where they could then streamline into different shifts and then place them into a senior secondary after 3 years, where they could decide at the age of 14 if they wanted to go back more into that more academic stream or go into a senior sec and do a technical vocational class. Nothing was wrong with that. I actually found that to make more sense than you taking some of these students that are obviously not suited for this and trying to force them into that 8 hours of school for 7 years of their life, for them to come out frustrated at 18 with the same result that they may have been able to come out with at 14. I think that ability in the junior sex, where someone was able to have a pause at 14 and maybe get a re-evaluation, I think made more sense. But then we always try to force equity. We try to force people to force everything into even categories. So we're forcing everyone to seem like everyone is going to a 7-year school now. Like, if we cannot tell this difference, it's ridiculous and it doesn't work. It does not work. I always say this. Well, not always, but I regularly say this. Imagine someone. Let's look at 2 lives. Imagine someone went to the junior sex. At 14, they did some maths, they did some English, they tried this out for a little while longer, they recognize, hey, this is not for me. They enter an apprenticeship program and they start working from the age of 14 as an apprentice into more professional, into whatever skill they want to do. At the age of, let's say, 18, 19, 20, 21, where someone might graduate with a bachelor's degree. At the age of 21, this person would have had 7 years working experience. I draw this example a lot for some people who are in the live regularly. You may have heard me say it before. This person with this 7 years work experience at 21 may have already bought a car with their own money. They already have their own bank account. They know how NIS works. They know health surcharge. They may have already started their own first business. They may be self-employed by that time. They're already earning their own money. And then can you imagine someone fresh out with a bachelor's degree at 21 then comparing to that person who ended at 14? Would there still be the same stigma? Because this person who ended at 14 now would have a vehicle. They're at a higher level in their life already than you who are fresh out with a bachelor's degree, going into the job market, recognizing that people want, your education, but they also want some job experience. And now this person with the 7 years experience, maybe they can settle a little more now. They already did some CXC in between. They take up and do a degree at the age of 21 part-time, and it takes them 5 years while they work. So at the age of 26, they have that same bachelor's degree but with more work experience. Would they be further back than someone who stayed in the school stream? Would they see themselves, when they look at themselves in society comparatively, would they see themselves as lesser than? Or versus that same 14-year-old person who already knew at the age of 14 that this school business wasn't getting along with them, and you force them then. Now they don't have the option of ending at 14. They have to go through and write CXC. They go through and fight up in CXC. They barely get a pass. They barely get anything. You tell them do it again. They do it again. They repeat it. They do CXC twice. They barely get anything. They get just enough to scrape in, and someone advises them, go do Form 6. They barely get into Form 6. Someone tells them, well, maybe that grade mightn't get you into UE, so go to CNC, the Caribbean Nazarene College. Go up to Maracas St. Joseph and do a next 3-year college degree. And they barely scrape through that. By the time they're done, they have some barely scrape through qualifications. They have no work experience. They have put their parents in more debt, in more struggle for the last 7 years, and they have nearly nothing to show for it. They still cannot get a job in the field because they are not very proficient in the field they studied in, and they do not have the work experience. Did that benefit them in any way? I don't think so. I think this placement, for all the kind of too open-hearted thing where you don't want to see any child left out, how are they going to feel? It's not about that. It's about getting the ideal position for everyone. That's my view on that. That is my view on that. But in the hopes of seeing if the Ministry of Education is even going to change that SEA system, going to change anything, my hopes are not that high. Ministry, no support for online modality when schools reopen. So, imagine they close Sandotech and Jandy. Imagine that. So, now, there were 2 years where we had the opportunity to experiment with alternative schooling methods. And after the 2 years, you would suppose that some part of these alternatives would have functioned with some kind of benefit and something would have stayed on, you would hope. Your hope would be lost. The Ministry of Education and the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association yesterday met to discuss a number of issues relating to the reopening of school. Following the conclusion of the 2-hour-long session, Education Minister and Tutor Vice President said clarity has been achieved in several areas. The Tutor First Vice President said, as far as the Ministry of Education is concerned, there is no mandate to use the online modality. So, they are not going to use the online modality, basically. He stressed where there are principals who are insisting on this mandate, they are doing it on their own without any support of the ministry. So, if there's a principal out there who sees that there may be some benefit in trying to get this online system to work, well, you're out on your own because the ministry is not going to give you any support. Yeah. Regarding, right, they spoke about the distancing, etc., etc., etc. too. Now, I am so disappointed in this. Are you really telling me that we had this opportunity? The internet has literally changed the world we live in. We have these young people that are immersed in the online environment. We allowed them to do schooling with some of this for the last 2 years. And then we are really going to go back to fully an old system. I find that ridiculous. I don't understand this. I think if we had private systems, well, I don't even have to think about this because I know that private schools, private institutions are already using some of these modalities, some of these alternatives to get the best out of children. Listen, I know some children that really struggle with this online system, but I also know some children that blossomed in this system. Some children really benefited from this. Some kids will struggle to adapt. I am not saying go fully. Online or anything like that. Maybe some children need that in school, in person only. But are you really going to tell me that I'm thinking about myself here as student age. Myself back in those days. I am trying to imagine myself there. Like, back in school days, I usually say this. I am almost sure if I was born in another time with other tests, someone would have tested me and said I had some one of those attention deficit something business. I was easily distracted and my mind daydreamed and drifted a lot. I would have liked that online learning environment where I could have gotten just exactly what needed to be learned and spread a little wider with it also. I would have enjoyed that. But are you really going to tell me that I would have been given this opportunity to have this, and then you are going to tell me that I have to now be locked back into this institute that is, for all intents and purposes, a kind of prison to some extent. I am locked in there with several different people who may be torturing me. Something I always remember from my secondary school life is that my secondary school life wasn't that bad, but something I remember talking to some people after I reached university. And you hear some people to speak about even in your same secondary school that you went to, that same college that you went to, and you hear them relate their life back then. And some people went through some literal torture in school. They went through 7 years, 5 years, how many ever years of torture in those institutions. For some people, that institution was the first and only place they really experienced violence. There are some people, some children live a tortured existence in schooling institutions. And then you're going to tell them that maybe after they've gotten a glimpse of some other alternative, we are going to lock you back into this institution. We are going to take away your phone and your tablet and your computer for all the 8 hours you are in there. You are not to use any technology, and you are now to pay attention again to this boring, monotonous teacher in front of you that isn't even interested in the subject that you are interested in. Are we really going to do that to all of our students? Are we going to put them back there? Now, the truth is, when you're dealing with an entire system like this, on the Ministry of Education side, maybe that's the only option they see themselves as having. But this, to me, is where parents come in. Parents, pay attention to your children, especially around this time. You may have had an opportunity to get a glimpse into how your child learns. So, I taught private tutoring. I tutored for quite some time. Most of my time in university, even in my teen years, I started teaching tutoring. Parents fed up of kids at home. I find that ridiculous. If you're fed up of kids at home and they're your kids, then you shouldn't have had kids. If you're fed up of your kids and they're still children, that's a you problem. But a lot of parents just come out of their teens, so they don't even know how to parent. That's another problem. I'm talking about the parents who are paying attention. Do you think they should be allowed to choose subjects after Form 1? I think parents should be allowed to hone in subjects from 5 years old. There are children that already show natural interests in something. I have some nephews that know more about the solar system than me. If you quiz some of my nephews on the solar system, they will marvel you. And then, most of my nephews, through their younger years, because quite a few of us teach, they learn a lot more. And then I'm thinking, taking some of them then, having this wide expanse of knowledge, curious about so many different things, and then throwing them into a school that is going to tell them, don't be curious about that, don't be curious about that, don't be curious about that, don't be curious about that. Only learn what we tell you to learn here and learn it in this boring way that we tell you to learn it. That's going to kill their curiosity. I could tell you, I was a very curious person. I liked learning. School did not help my learning. I enjoy learning. Anyone who looks at my contemplation, for the most part, I go and learn a subject every day and do a presentation on it on TikTok every day for no fee. I do that for free because I find it interesting. I like that. I'm a curious person. Schooling could have never gotten that out of me. I didn't like schooling because it didn't encourage you in your curiosity in that way. So, in that way, I think some parents could be choosing subjects for children from the age of 5, as it were, honing them into some better ways that they would learn better. What they call that, the Montessori style learning. University learning is the best, have more freedom. Some subjects like art and drama that they may not be interested in but have to keep doing for 3 years. Who knows? Who knows? I think that's the truth. You hone them into some of that practicality long before. I love the ability to be able to get a snapshot of actual classroom scenario. I just find it such a wasted opportunity for us to just go back plainly to the old system. But as I'm saying, it's for the parents. The ministry may not be able to do it. The ministry may not be able to do it, but as parents, you should. Kyle says, I disagree, Nathan. A lot of parents would push their children towards doctors, lawyers, etc. As adverse to now, Kyle? As adverse to now? Like what's happening right now? And a lot of parents pushing their children to that right now. So I don't see how that would be any worse than right now. If a lot of parents push their children to doctors, lawyers, etc., that's not going to be worse than anyway right now. We might even get some better doctors. And some people who may have been shooting for doctors might end up nurses. Some people who may have been shooting for doctors might end up the biotechnologists. There are many different fields in and around that doctor field. Some people who are shooting at lawyers may end up as different members in the judiciary, may end up as politicians. There are many different fields. I don't think that would even be as much a problem as many people think, because there are many people right now who the child hasn't learned to talk yet, and they don't say that going to be a doctor, you know. He had to be a lawyer, you know. That is a lawyer, you know. He had to be. So that, like, I always find it funny when people say a problem that is going to be in a new system that already exists in the old system. That already exists in the old system. If they push them from a younger age, the kids may not get experience in other fields that may catch their interest. The world we are living in right now, I don't think that is possible. And here's the thing. If you are learning to be a doctor, you are not going to just learn only the parts of the body. There would be lots of other general knowledge that you would have to learn also. And if you are learning that general knowledge, you may eventually find it interesting. That's just the way it goes. And I do not, as I said already, I do not see how this is going to be any different from the problems we currently experience. Parents currently do this very same thing that you are accusing them of. So I don't see the difference in that. My father pushed me to be a doctor, lawyer, and I went towards geography and forestry. Yeah, you did. And that very same thing can happen even if you were being pushed from younger. The knowledge of geography and forestry isn't going to disappear from the world. In fact, the classes that do geography and forestry may seem so much more interesting to you that you may be able to grasp what you are interested in from a younger age. If only the people who are very interested in this are the people inside of the field in the first place. That's just my theory on it. Who knows? Now, the ministry, in speaking about how they are going to handle the increased requirement that they are going to have for cleaning, etc. You wouldn't believe whose name they called. Let me see if I could find that. Right. Asked if a rotation or hybrid system has been completely ruled out, Seal said yes. Right now, the plan is for physical reopening totally. Seal said concerns were raised about the sanitization of isolation rooms at schools after use by an infected student or teacher. As he said, some reluctance has been displayed to have persons go in to clean before 42 hours have passed. To this, and he said the ministry assured it was in consultation with the National Maintenance, Training and Security Company to ensure there are no issues over what is expected. Now, as soon as I saw MTS name mentioned there with the Ministry of Education, I felt sorry for MTS all over again. I felt sorry for MTS all over again. I felt so sorry for them. Because I don't know how many of you were in the live when we spoke about this. MTS, that same company, MTS owed $600 million by government and state agencies. And listen to this first line in this article. The National Maintenance, Training and Security Company Limited is owed over $600 million by government ministries and state agencies. Its biggest debtor is the Ministry of Education, which owes $300 million. Now, imagine you're the MTS. Imagine you're MTS. Imagine you're MTS and the Ministry of Education owes you $300 million. And they're speaking up to you about, increasing your workload to really get the job done. In this new term, we need you to go out there and do these extra additional duties and more of this and more of that and a little more of that. By the way, we still owe you $300 million. And for MTS is owned by the government, so they cannot sue them. They cannot sue the ministry. So you just have to stay there and take licks. Interesting says that is an abusive relationship. And that is exactly what it is. It is an abusive relationship. That is so ridiculous. How are you going to MTS with any kind of request? MTS is supposed to say no one can come to us with any request until they come to us with a check. When you come to us with the next request, come with a check. A signed check with the money you owe us. Don't come and request anything additional. How are we functioning as a country? How are we functioning as a country? How are you expecting an agency to produce all of this additional, to do all of this additional duties, and you still owe them $600 million? Ministry of Education in specific owes them $300 million. Listen, $300 million is money that a human would not spend in their entire lifetime. There are families where you may be able to track several generations of the family, and they haven't spent $300 million. There may be some families you could track them for the last 1,000 years, and the entire family may not have spent $300 million. That is a lot of money, and it's owed to them. But hey, come, let me talk about your new duties, your additional duties, MTS. Come, let's speak about that. Poor MTS. I could feel sorry for them, you know. I could feel sorry for them. How they will do MTS like that? How they gonna do MTS like that? It's really sad. All right. That is government for you. Yes, it is. Let's get to what many people have been asking about: the increase in gas prices. Gas prices are going up. Fact. What are we going to do about that? Like, someone, the guy who asked earlier asked, how can it be that we sell gas prices are going up, but we have to pay more for gas? Yo, Ronnie, what's up? I saw you over on Instagram. I saw you. 250 to full my tank at the price point. Ouch. Ouch. That's hard. That is hard. Gas prices go up. The price of super and premium gasoline will be increased by $1 each. And the cost of kerosene, Ronnie. And the cost of kerosene will increase by 50 cents on April 19th, 2022. This from Finance Minister Colin Burt, who said the government has decided not to spend close to $2 billion subsidizing the cost of fuel. Speaking in Parliament on Friday, Imbert said the government will now have to fork out $840 million to subsidize the cost of fuel. That is why the price is increasing, sir, who was asking about that. Because the only reason we pay less for gas is because the government subsidizes the cost. Here's the thing. We do produce gas and oil. We do. But we produce that as a nation. And by and large, the people who extract it are foreign companies. How we get that money? As you say that, I remember they took back the water pump in my son's school because Ministry of Education didn't pay. Ouch. How we get the money from our natural gas, our natural resources by and large, is when a lot of these foreign companies extract it and they sell it, they must pay us some money for it. And then in the case of some other downstream industries where our government actually has some companies that do some of this work, we sell some of that internationally and make some foreign exchange, and that's how we get the money. However, when you go to the pump to buy gas, it's not necessarily our gas or whichever gas you're buying. It's about the global price of gas. There's a global price for gas that it is sold at. That's the price we sell it at when we sell it to other countries. That's the price we would have to pay for it at the pumps. So if the gas prices increase very high around the world, what would happen is, as a country, we would make more money, but the price would still increase for the people who have to pay for it at the pump. If you do not want to pay more for it at the pump, then the only way that happens is the government, when they make more money, this is what happened previously. When the government made more money, as they made more money from the increase in gas prices, they would then pay more money for us in the subsidy. It's like when you go to the pump and you pay for gas, the government pays some of the money for you too. So you pay some and the government pays some. So as we make more money in gas, the government was able to pay more of that money for us. So we got some reward from it. Now, many people have been asking for that subsidy to be removed for a long time because the government spends a lot of money on it. Now, I understand that argument. However, I also have a view of it where if the country is getting monetary benefit from our natural resource that is supposed to belong to everyone, all the citizens of the country, I think we should get some tangible benefit from it. And I see it as being a good benefit that people are able to get cheap transport throughout the country. I think that was a good thing. I also understand, though, that by the government paying for that, they are also giving that benefit, probably majority, to some of the wealthier people in the country. Because the wealthier people in the country generally spend more on fuel. They drive around more, they have more vehicles, so they actually get more of the subsidized cost. So in a sense, when the government subsidizes fuel, they give more money to more of the wealthier people in a sense. However, as I said, I understand totally the feeling like if my country is making money, I find we should see some tangible benefits. And if the government doesn't spend the money on a subsidy, they are going to spend the money on something else. That's generally the way the government works. Would I trust the government to spend the money better on some other government project, or would I prefer the government just pays for some gas for me? I am leaning towards the gas side, to be very honest. Like, I've seen how the government spends money otherwise. We have a former attorney general, currently a local government minister, who they said, what, 20 million in a year? Yeah. I prefer that 20 million in a year be used on my gas services. We have a large social service bill, though. Yes, we do. And that large social service bill, a large chunk of that social service bill goes to already wealthy people also. So it's not even like the large social service bill only goes to the people struggling. And in a sense, you could consider the gas bill a social service bill. But that's the answer as to why, although we sell gas, we still have to pay more for gas. A guy in the, I don't know if he's still here. I hope you are here, still here, so you could get the answer. But a guy in the live earlier on was asking about that. That's why we pay more. So the prices of premium gasoline and super gasoline will be $6.75 per liter and $5.97 per liter respectively, while the price for diesel will be adjusted by 50 cents per liter to $3.91 per liter. Listen, I'm cool with diesel. Like, cool. I'll take that. Diesel better out here. Yeah. He said the cost of a 21-pound tank of LPG cooking gas will remain the same. The cost of LPG remained fixed at $21. So, you see, we're still getting some subsidy. By the way, the current price that we are still paying is already a subsidized price. Remember the price we read from Barbados. I have that article pulled up. Barbados had an adjustment to their gas prices set for around the same time as ours too. Barbados had a planned adjustment to their prices also. And their price for gasoline will be sold at $4.13 per liter. Now, bear in mind, that's EC dollars. EC dollars is about 2.5 to 1. So, 2.5 by 4 would be what? $8, $9, $10 per liter? A little more than $10 per liter for gas, while our gas price is $5 and $6.70, around $6. Let's average it around $6. $6 to $10+. That's the difference between Barbados and us. We are still getting a subsidized price. The government is still paying nearly half of it. Diesel will rise by 17 cents, and they have a cost over in Barbados of $3.46 per liter of diesel, while our cost for diesel is $3.91. Remember that 2.5, again that 2.5 meaning that their cost for diesel is nearly 2.5 times our cost. Yikes. And then this is where their cost really hits heat. Really hits hard. You go just right. Really hits hard. Their cost for LPG, The 25 pound costs $45. The 22 pound costs $39. Let's say $40, $2.5. 40 times 2 is 80. 2.5 would be what? $100. While we pay 21, 22, 25 according to where you buy, $25 to $100, 100 plus. Yeah, our subsidy still works for us, and they still have some of the largest subsidy on the cooking gas, and this one I agree with, because the argument that some of the fuel prices for transport may have gone to some of the larger, richer, wealthier people, the cooking gas is one that helps basically everyone. Everyone would have to buy cooking gas, and our cooking gas is subsidized, so you have cheap cooking gas. You could pressure cook. You could go and pressure cook the bull heel for 3 hours, and you aren't even concerned about your gas in that way. That's the fact of that matter. So gas prices are increasing, but even though they are increasing, we still aren't the worst off here in Trinidad and Tobago. There's one more story I would like to cover. One more, and then we call it a night. One more story. I found this story quite interesting. It's a story from the family court. Judge wants, let's pull that up. Judge wants conditions for approving fully contested divorce reconsidered. Now, let's go through here and see if we could get the context of this entire thing. A family court judge has called for the consideration of changing the onerous statutory conditions that must be met for the court to approve a fully contested divorce. It may have been considered absurd where, in the case before me, it is obvious that the marriage has ended, but one party insists on dragging the marriage on to its inevitable demise, and if the petitioner fails to satisfy the court that the respondent's actions amount to desertion, intolerable behavior, or adultery, the years it can take to qualify for the 5-year separation fact seems wastefully long and bitter indeed, Ram Kerry Singh said. Justice Ram Kerry Singh cited Section 4.1 of the Matrimonial Proceedings and Property Act, which set conditions that must be strictly applied by the court. Under the legislation, a divorce can only be granted if the petitioner is able to prove that their spouse committed adultery, is intolerable to deal with, or has deserted the relationship for 2 years. If the respondent consents to the divorce, the couple must have lived apart continuously for 2 years before making the application. If the petition is contested by the spouse and the petitioner cannot prove the cited issues in their relationship, the divorce can only be granted if they have lived apart continuously for 5 years. Justice Ram Kerry Singh suggested that the provisions could be considered draconian. Thankfully, this scenario before me does not happen often, but it presents the argument for doing away with default finding facts altogether so as to avoid the emotional, psychological torment of remaining in a marriage that is nothing more than a shell for how many years it would take to meet the requirements of the 5-year separation term. Good night, Guyana. What he name again? No, we did not talk about that, Rooney, and I'm kind of steering clear of that because I am not sure about all the information in that. I think it is something where all the information is not actually known quite yet. Even the pathologist report, I just don't want to get into suit. Like, when people are not public figures like that, the incident is something where it's, as of right now, it's still difficult to ascertain the exact facts of the matter. Trying to get in there and put your mouth one way or the other may cause more harm than help. Like, if I were to speak about that, I would be speaking in total generalities, because to try and get, I've seen a lot of people get really down into the specifics there, and I think a lot of people are painting themselves and their own trauma into that situation, thinking things that may have happened to them is exactly how that went, and I don't know if that is so. Yeah, what this judge was speaking about here is that the requirements for divorce in Trinidad and Tobago are kind of steep. That's what the judge is saying. You cannot just get a divorce easily. there are several requirements for it. And if you do not meet these requirements, then if the person you are attempting to divorce does not want to divorce you, you have to wait 5 years before you can get that divorce. And the judge is saying these are draconian measures that, in the judge's view, should be done away with. I am not sure I agree. Now, I could understand that for some people, that point of view, or the point of view I may espouse, could seem like an old one or an outdated one. But I think we need to be serious about facts. I think we need to be serious about acknowledging reality. Reality is the family is the building block of a successful society. If you are looking to any society that is doing well, the first thing you'd notice is a stable family structure. Essential to a stable family structure is a stable couple at the beginning. Essential to a stable couple, what has been historically the case is essential to a stable couple is something called, and I believe Dr. Jordan Peterson, some people in the live speak of him occasionally. I believe he got into some trouble for speaking about that, but something called enforced monogamy. What enforced monogamy isn't that people force you to stay with one person or anyone comes and locks you in a prison with somebody else, but enforced monogamy means our society puts a heavy amount of pressure on people to stay and remain monogamous. Because monogamous long-term relationships are statistical. You could go and look at any statistics. Listen, by the way, Will Smith was divorced when he married Jada. So maybe if the first divorce took some more pressure for the divorce to happen, he may not have been able to hops up Jada in too quick of a whirlwind marriage, and that might not have even occurred. Who knows? But yeah, Will and Jada is an interesting topic on that. But regardless of that, Will and Jada aren't seeking a divorce and the divorce is too hard to come by. That is not even the same thing. So it's not exactly the same thing. Do you think that a society should make divorces as easy to happen as a common boyfriend-girlfriend breakup? I don't think so. I think that marriage should have added benefit on it, and I think that marriage should have added difficulty in escaping. I think marriage should be a binding contract that is not as easily done away with as a boyfriend-girlfriend, hey, we done it, bye. I don't disagree with these laws. And here's what the stipulations are. If your spouse has committed adultery, you can get a divorce in Trinidad. If your spouse is intolerable to deal with, I found that one just interesting. What's the other word for it? Irreconcilable differences. If your spouse is intolerable to deal with, that is in a stipulation there, or has deserted the relationship for 2 years. And if none of those things are the case, then if you want to divorce your spouse, but they don't want to divorce you, then you have to wait 5 years to make sure that that decision is really something that you want to make. I kind of agree with that. And I think that puts the added pressure on someone to make a better decision, even in marriage at the beginning. That's my view. I don't think it should be easier to escape. And I know many people are going to come at that with the argument that this protects the abused and it protects the abusers. If it locks people in a marriage, it protects the abusers. I don't actually agree, because none of this actually stops someone from taking out a restraining order. None of this stops someone from leaving the marital home. None of this prohibits any of that. I think marriage should have a choice to review your partner and renew that contract. I don't agree. I actually don't agree with that. I think as a species, we have become life pair bonding for a specific reason. Many birds are life pair bonders, and they build stronger homes because of it. It does cover abuse. If your spouse is intolerable to deal with, that means they're abusive and they would give you a divorce. So the abuse isn't an argument here. I think we are life pair bonders for a reason. And I think the more ability you give people to get a divorce, the more divorces are going to happen. There's a reason that divorces have spiked within the last 30 years. It's because it's become more common and easier to come about. And some people may say that's a good thing and okay, but I think we are seeing some of the results in the broken homes and in the rearing of some children. Even in the case that some people have brought up here with the very unfortunate instance of this young lady who was killed or died at the hands seemingly of her father. That was a broken home also. I think enforced monogamy is the way in a society. We should be pressuring people to find partners that they are willing to pair bond with. That's if we are looking for successful societies. Now, granted, freedom is the thing, and we shouldn't be forcing anyone to anything in truth and in fact. That's not forcing anyone. I'm talking about societal pressures where it should be. Too many people stay in unhappy relationships and eventually it ends badly. I don't know if I agree with even that. I think it's not a matter of unhappy relationships that happen badly. Nobody will get married, then that's not true. That is not true. Interesting. That was the way that marriage has been since time immemorial, and people got married all the time. The reality is, if you give people an easy escape, people are going to take that easy escape. Listen, why do you think in some cultures, in the Asian culture in the United States, as free as the Asian culture is in the United States, the percentage of children born outside of wedlock is, I believe, under 10%, because there is still that pressure for enforced monogamy. No one is going to knock up my daughter and leave her like that. If you get my daughter pregnant, you marry her now. And that works. If you look at the Asian community, I was looking at the statistics right now in the United States. The top 10 earners, I believe, in the United States are all Asian communities. Now, you could talk about abuse in the families, and you could talk about unhappy marriages and yada, 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 yada. Fair enough. But look at the family results and tell me if they are not benefiting. Then look comparatively at cultures who do not have that. Cultures like the black culture, who is, I ain't taking nothing from nobody, why I leaving them? You leave here, and all right, good, they do leave, and maybe it was for the best, all right, fine, and look at the broken homes, and then look at the results. Black culture, black families that follow that broken home culture are consistently at the bottom of the rank. So, okay, you say that no one will marry if we keep these marriage standards at a high level. Well, if you keep them at a low level, your culture is going to devolve. Your society is going to crumble. Look at the societies that keep them at the higher level and tell me if they are not seeing a reward for what they are doing. And tell me if you don't want that reward. So often I see so many black people when they're talking about black culture, and we need to look at the Asians and look what they do. And even in Trinidad and Tobago, so regularly you'd hear people talking about the black culture and look at the Indian them and look how the Indian them is. It's so ridiculous. But you have to look at the culture. It's not just a matter of race. You look at the culture. Look at what you have held on to as your culture. The problem is modern society, not the system. The system has created modern society. Interesting. Modern society hasn't dropped from an alien planet. It's the system and the culture that we live in that produces the modern society. Society isn't a static thing. It's dynamic. It continually evolves. And it goes up, it goes down, it changes form. Listen, the culture we have with the obsession with gender fluidity and the obsession with alternative sexualities, etc. It is not something new. new. It is something that popped up at the end and the fall of the Roman Empire. It is something that popped up at the end and the fall of the Grecian Empire. It's something that popped up at the end and the fall of the Persian Empire before that. Gender fluidity, questions about gender, questioning the mores that ground our reality, has been something that has popped up at the end of nearly every civilization. You could question if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but the fact is, if you study history and you study anthropology of civilizations, you can see that basically every great civilization, as it came to its end, almost always had a prevalence of the questioning of the general, the bedrocks of society, questioning marriage, questioning male and female roles, questioning gender roles, questioning sexuality. It always happens. The whole hard times make strong men make good times make weak men. Because in good times, some of the suppositions that came naturally to us in hard times don't come naturally to us in good times. For example, something I said in a previous contemplation, when for parents of generations gone before, it was easier to train your children about not wasting things because you had very limited resources. If you have very limited resources and your child wastes something, you just literally do not have enough for them to waste. And if your child is asking for too much, you don't have that amount of resources to just give them a snow cone every day. But when you have that amount of resources, now you have to find a reason why you have to tell them no. And some parents are not very good at that. And by leaning into all of your child's desires, they are raising up generations of monsters, of people who do not understand the value of labor. They think there are people in the younger generation that think food comes from the grocery. They don't understand food comes from farmers and that there must be transport between the farmers to a packaging plant, and then it's processed and then it's transported from there to the grocery. There are some people, listen, go on Twitter and look at some of those modern bubbles of the teens. It's insane. They don't understand. No, I'm speaking about 20-year-olds. People in university that don't have an understanding of some of this basic facts of life. And that has happened because society has become so easy that we have lost that understanding. So, in modern society, there are women, young girls, who argue that the only reason that boys are stronger than girls is because society trained them to be that way. There are literally people that argue that nonsense. If you go to a poor, struggling society and you ask someone, a young girl who has 5 brothers and 3 sisters, they all work very hard, and you ask her, is there a difference between boys and girls? She will laugh at how ridiculous that question is, because she knows that when they have to tote the buckets from the standpipe to home, her brother has to tote 20 buckets on the go-kart, while she only could tote maybe 5. It's a common understanding in harder societies. These gender roles become very obvious. But all of a sudden, when everything is easier in society, some people question, are men really stronger than women? And that becomes an actual question. People out there in the United States acting like a woman is a difficult thing to understand the difference of. While any person in a poor, struggling society understands that of the most natural way they understand that. That question doesn't even exist in their mind. That's the problem. And I think that same thing also happens with marriage. When society becomes so easy, some people don't understand the use of getting pair bonding that lasts a lifetime. They don't understand that. They think, well, we could just form an ex-bond and find someone else. I don't necessarily need someone that I need to trust till I die. Whatever. And the next thing, younger people saying that I don't care to have children. Who needs children? That's again because we're in a society where you get pension. When you get old and you turn 65, you got pension. But if you were in a society where there was not pension, when you got old, your children had to take care of you. You would understand why you had to have children. And then when your children came to the age of 20, you start to pressure them, son, when you're going and look to have a little child of your own, because you're looking for even the furtherance of your own generations, and who is going to take care of everyone as they get older. That's reality. But when you live in a soft reality where pension pays that for you, you don't understand that reality. When you live in a soft reality where you could get the companionship of online people at a whim, you don't have to go to bed and wonder who's going to keep you company at night. You pull up your phone and you have the world at your side, at your fingertips. But if the society didn't have that reality, all of a sudden getting someone to trust that could lie next to you night in, night out, that becomes a lot more useful and you understand it more. I think the soft society is changing some of these rudimentary understandings that we are supposed to have. What say you? Feel free to comment. If you are viewing this on YouTube on the repeat, feel free to drop a comment. Tell me what you think. You could tell me I'm wrong, you know. I am occasionally wrong. I'm pretty sure I might be even often wrong on some things. Tell me I'm wrong. Maybe I am. But that's the way I see it. That's the way my view is. That's what my mind is full of. All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. But that's all I have for now. We had a good live. I'm not going to have an after live chat tonight on TikTok. This is going to be it on all platforms. But I thank you for tuning in. It was a good experience as usual. And I will see you all again on Monday when I'll be having the next live. Next Mindful Live Monday at 9:30 p.m. Tune in then. We'd have a discussion then and it's all going to be nice. Good night, folks. Peace. Love. All that good stuff.